Greetings, friends. Welcome to episode 114 of Into the Necrosphere. Last week, I spoke to Shane Embury of Napalm Death. This week, I move from one legend to another as I welcome Ross Dolan of Immolation to the podcast for the very first time. He was here to talk about the upcoming record, Acts of God, which Nuclear Blast will be putting out on February the 18th. We also spoke about how he met Bob Vigna, why that friendship and creative partnership continues to endure after so many years, as well as a whole lot more. So that'll be coming your way very shortly. If you're new to the podcast, make sure that you elbow drop that subscribe button, whether it's on YouTube, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, or whatever your platform of choice. Also, make sure that you follow the show on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you do, you will already have seen that I announced next week's guests, Tim Pope and Kane Cressell of the Amenta, after they won what many consider to be the greatest accolade or the highest honors in extreme music, namely the #1 spot on Into the Necrosphere's Albums of the Year list. I had to get them back on Mean Street Studios to talk about Revelator. We did a track-by-track breakdown of that album, which, of course, spun off into various other subtopics. Trust me, you are not going to want to miss that episode. That'll be out next Tuesday. You will also not want to miss the bands I'm going to be talking about after my conversation with Ross. This week, I am talking about Chaos Perversion and Hlamdomrack, a band out of Sweden. I did actually mention them on the socials last year, but not a band I've had enough time to listen to actually have on the, or at least spotlight on the podcast. So doing that this week. And then, of course, I will also be doing my usual news rant, some interesting responses to last week's episode where I spoke about my thoughts on this whole Joe Rogan debacle. I see old slow Joe Biden has now added his voice to the mix. So, yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about at the end of the show. Stick around for that. Final hygiene announcement. Make sure that if you haven't done so yet, you head over to the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store and pick yourself out a t-shirt or a hoodie. When I finally get around to it, I will work on some new merchandise. But for now, there's some cool stuff there for you to check out. And whatever you buy on there, obviously I plow straight back into the show. So it's not there to finance my Ferrari, but it may help with a fancy microphone here and there, decent camera, etc., etc. And like I said, this year the goal is to try and do a couple of in-person episodes. So we'll see how I make that work. It's definitely going to take a little bit of investment, and whatever ducats I make off of Teespring will go towards that. But for now, I would like to welcome to Into the Necrosphere for the first time, Ross Dolan of Immolation. So, first of all, man, how's everything been going with you? How has the last 18 months been treating you?
I guess as good as can be, given the situation. I mean, it was obviously a very bizarre time for everybody. Being locked down in the beginning and not being able to go anywhere, and kind of just being in this weird place for a number of months in the beginning was definitely very strange, very rough in a lot of ways. But I think during this time we tried to focus on the positive and keep busy. We had planned after the Atonement touring cycle to come back, take a few months and start the process, finish up the writing of the record, which Bob started back in 2018, and get everything finished up and recorded in 2020. So obviously that didn't happen because pandemic hit and things shut down, but at least we did have the music to focus on. I think that kept our sanity throughout most of this. So yeah, so I think I could speak for all the guys. It was definitely a challenging time, but luckily we had the benefits of the internet to help us share the files, send the demos back and forth. We each worked on the material on our own at home individually. So if nothing else, we made use of the downtime and tried to kind of look forward to more positive days. So yeah, I mean, so we managed, I guess, as well as everybody else, given the situation. So
And you're still based in New York, right?
Yes. I
I was about
actually
to say,
moved.
so you got the
Yeah.
sharp end of the lockdown regulations and the
Yeah.
rules and stuff like that.
Yeah, we started in March of last year, 2020. We started 20, sorry, March of 2020, so 2 years ago. It's hard to keep track of time, you know. But yeah, we locked down in March of 2020, and we were pretty much, the state was shut down for a couple of months. I have family down in Yonkers. I moved upstate back in 2016, so I'm about 5 hours from where I used to live. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't able to really visit my family. I have a lot of, elderly family members that live down in Yonkers still, and I couldn't see them for a couple of months, probably till about April or May. So that was probably the roughest part of that, was being separated from, the family and stuff like that. But other than that, I mean, it was what it was. We each kind of coped in our own way. So, we're still
Yeah.
here, luckily. So
Did you get COVID at all?
I did. I got it in November of 2020.
Yeah.
So, and ironically, my girlfriend and I were being extra cautious with my mom. She was turning 90 that year. So we were being extra cautious, trying not to, bring anything to her. And ironically, she's the one who gave it to us. We went down there for her 90th birthday, ironically, and she had it. She had very mild symptoms, luckily, more like allergy symptoms, which she typically gets every year. And, we came home from the party. It was a party. It was just like, 3 or 4 family members. That was it.
Mm.
But I mean, we came home from that and we all had COVID up here, in my house. So, but luckily none of us got it really bad. I just kind of lost my taste and smell for about 3 weeks. So that was probably the
It's
weirdest
the
part for
most,
me.
I was just about to say, it's the fucking
Yeah.
weirdest thing I've ever experienced, because I had it last year in September.
Yeah.
And I've said to people, it's like something hacked into your brain and just switched a load of stuff off. Like,
Yeah.
I was eating
Yeah.
steak and I'm like, I literally could be eating a fucking rolled up newspaper.
Yeah.
It would taste
Yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah, it was super bizarre. I mean, and it happened so instant. Like I woke up one morning and I came up to have my coffee and I didn't smell the coffee, didn't register. I poured my cup, I started drinking my coffee, and I knew right away, because my girlfriend had already tested for it. She tested positive, and I had my coffee that morning and I couldn't taste anything. I was like, well, I think it's safe to say I have it.
Oh, God damn it. God got me too. Mine was the same. My girlfriend had it and she was pretty much down and out.
Yeah.
And I held on for about 3 or 4 days, and then I got tested in the morning, tested positive, and I was fucked for about a week and a half.
Yeah.
And I also got super paranoid because I don't know about you, but it made me feel really weak. So I was on like as much vitamins and testosterone supplements and everything I could possibly find. I was like, I can't come out of this with long COVID or anything remotely close to it.
Yeah, it was I mean, my girl got a little, she had more like head cold symptoms. So it wasn't horrible for her, and her son got it. The three of us were kind of quarantined for 2 weeks together. So he had it, and he had the same thing that she did, but he had a really bad cough that he kind of had for about a month after that. So that was the extent of it. And we haven't gotten it since. I mean, that was before the shots were available. So, we all got our shots, and I've gotten sick before the holidays recently, but it was more like a head cold, and I did take the test and I was negative, so I didn't have COVID again. So, but I know
Yeah.
I have friends who've gotten it about 3 times already, and each time varied. Like the first couple of times for them were really bad, so and the last time wasn't as bad. So so it ran the gamut, from like really bad to kind of not as severe. So I guess it depends on the person. Very weird.
Yeah. I was interested when you said that a lot of what is on Acts of God had already been written before the pandemic, because
Yeah.
what I've picked up a lot in a lot of people's music of late is there's a real darkness to a lot of stuff that people are writing, and invariably you'll talk to folks and they'll say, well, it was part of what was going on with me personally, etc. But when you did the tweaking and the changes and things like that, how much of what was going on externally kind of influenced that, or influenced the shape that the record ultimately took?
A lot, in a lot of ways. It's not a pandemic album lyrically, so to be clear about that, I mean, the songs we started writing back in 2018, which is unusual for us to have that kind of jump start, on new album material. We weren't even finished with the Atonement cycle, and I think Bob had a couple of songs, like 3 or 4 songs, by the time we, came out of the touring cycle for Atonement. So yeah, so that was a big step forward for us. So we were kind of confident we'd have a few months to kind of just get everything wrapped up and recorded, but that didn't happen. So he spent the rest of 2020 and the first part of 2021 writing the music, and during that whole time, I started kind of taking notes and writing things down, the usual process for me, for the lyrics, just the ideas about what these songs are going to be about. And there was enough going around us at that time in the world, a lot of craziness to kind of, to get inspiration from that. I guess since we were so, we were locked down for so many months, it was natural to kind of look externally for ideas and for stuff. So, I got, caught up in that mode of just like getting up every morning, reading the news feeds for like an hour or so, and just kind of absorbing myself in that, So yeah, a lot of, the lyrics that you see on Acts of God were definitely inspired by the time, but not specifically the pandemic. It was the last couple of years, that we kind of took our cues from lyrically. But yeah, I mean, I think we all went to that dark place, individually during that time. We all had our moments. I mean, speaking for myself, I had plenty of moments that were very dark, and I mean, obviously it was all up here, but, I guess the lyrics were a way to kind of channel that into something, useful, So yeah, I think it was, it definitely, had some impact on the record, being as dark as it was. I mean, we had intended for, before the pandemic, we had kind of talked about, we have to, step up our game. Atonement was, is going to be a really challenging record to follow because it was received really well. And it was like, it was surprising that it got, so much, positive, such a positive response. So we never expect that. So we were like, okay, we need to kind of up our game a little bit for this one. But we were all kind of, discuss like, taking in a darker direction and kind of revisiting some of that earlier style stuff that we had done. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the direction Bob went. I mean, you could talk all you want about how you'd like it to be, but at the end of the day, what Bob comes out with is, could be completely different than what you had already planned. So it's just, you can never predict the writing process in that sense. So, but luckily, yeah, he created like a whole album of just extremely dark, very intense music. And, once we had all the songs, and I was able to sit down with Bob and kind of go over all my notes and rants and, just craziness that I've been writing down for the last 2 years. And he did the same with me. And we just kind of, put everything together. We kind of identified, different songs for different concepts, which is a big part of the process for us. Figuring out what song is going to be about what is always very challenging, so that was fun for us. I mean, we always enjoy that part of the process where Bob and I could sit down when the music's done and just collaborate in that sense and really, pick each other's brains and, kind of explain what we're thinking about, each song and where the ideas came from, and trying to expand on that together, with our two different perspectives sometimes. So it makes for I think a better song lyrically. So anyway, without getting too much on a tangent, yes, the couple of years during the pandemic, as well as a year or two before that, this all kind of made its way into the album lyrically.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned the relationship you have with Bob, and I was kind of going back over a couple of older interviews that I that you had done. I mean, you and Bob legitimately are now one of the longest enduring musical collaborations, friendships, what have you, in the death metal scene. Can you remember where you first met him? What your first impressions of the man were when you met him?
Oh, sure. We met during the rigor mortis days when pre-immolation was called rigor mortis New York, not to be confused with rigor mortis from Texas, the thrash band. So I was good friends with the singer of rigor mortis, Andrew. Andrew used to come, and hang out with, myself and Will from Mortician and a couple of our friends. We were from a different part of, side of Yonkers than he was from. So he'd always come over and hang out with us because we were all like-minded as far as what music we were into. He was always into the more, extremer, more extreme music at the time, and, when I say extreme music, you're talking about the earlier like German thrash stuff,
Yeah.
Creator Destruction, Sodom, early Dark Angel, Venom, Slayer, Exodus, or, all that good, darker thrash stuff at the time. So we were all kind of like-minded in that sense. And so I knew Andrew really well. And from, getting to know Andrew over the years, he told me about Rigor Mortis. I didn't know he was in a band, and he invited me down to their rehearsal spot. So a couple of my friends went down and we hung out to rigor mortis jams periodically from time to time. So that's how I met Bob, just from going to the rigor mortis rehearsals. And Bob was awesome. Great dude. I mean, we hit it off right away. I mean, he was, great guitar player at the time, going back, we were like teenagers, like 16, 17. But yeah, I mean, it was very few and far between to find like-minded people in a musical sense, back then, and to find, musicians who were actually interested in playing this type of music. So when you found people like that, you kind of you became fast friends, what I'm saying, and they became your brothers right away. So yeah, I was tight with all the rigor mortis guys. And when Andrew left the band in early '88, rigor mortis played like their last show around December of like '87. I was at that show. It was at a local venue. And then shortly after that, Andrew left the band. And that's when we formed. The guys asked me to jump in to fill in for Andrew with rigor mortis. And I said, sure, because I played bass very badly, I might say at the time. But I was up for it. It was, the kind of music that I wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? And it was the first band in my area that was doing that. So I said, yes, absolutely. I was looking forward to it. And then, what happened was, Bob came over to my house right at the beginning there to show me, the parts in Immolation, the song Immolation. That was the first song I learned. And then we decided, what, this stuff that's being written now is completely different than the rigor mortis stuff. We changed the name and we just kind of moved forward in a new direction with Immolation. So that's how it started. So Bob and I were instant friends back then, and we've worked very closely together. We shared the same vision from the beginning, and we're brothers. I mean, we are brothers. I mean, that's just the fact of it. I mean, we've done a lot with this band, and it's it was our really pushing for that and keeping things alive, and even through the dark times. I mean, we had a lot of dark moments throughout the last 34 years where we just you're very uncertain as to which way the band was headed, and how things were going to progress, especially during the first and second record. We had that 5-year gap where we kind of stepped away from Roadrunner and we didn't have a label, and we made that move, but we didn't think of the consequences. Like, yes, we wanted to leave Roadrunner, because we didn't feel like they were paying enough attention to us. And, we got out of that deal, luckily, but we were in a situation where we didn't have a label. So it was hard enough to get on Roadrunner at the time. And now, like right after that first record, we didn't have a label. So yeah, we made some unwise moves back then because we were green. We weren't very business savvy. We didn't know the inner workings of the music industry. We were just green kids, teenagers who were just wanted to play music, and then we had to deal with this whole business side of things, which was kind of a bummer for us back then. And, so yeah, we made a lot of, dumb moves over the years, but, hopefully we've learned from our mistakes. But yeah, throughout all of that, the point was that, it was our dedication and passion to this, Bob and I, that really kept this going, motivating each other, pushing each other, so that's kind of how, we kept things rolling, and having that friendship, as the foundation for all of that really helped. And, the fact that we had, the same vision for this band, and the fact that we're both extremely passionate about what we do. And, we're still those, teenage kids who are just really, really into this extreme form of music. We're still that now, just, we have a, a more mature worldview now, of course.
You guys really sort of pioneered a type of sound, or at least a sub-style of death metal, which frankly, I almost think you guys, quite a while back already transcended death metal. With the sort of dark stuff that you guys do, the way that you incorporate melody, your voice, all of that sort of thing. And I mean, it's incredibly rare, and I think it's incredibly special to have found, I guess, that person who you have that sort of chemistry with, to where, I mean, if you listen to the entire Immolation discography end to end, you can almost hear that singular vision running, evolving, from Dawn of Possession on. But certainly, evolving, getting better, and running through like a singular vein, through every single thing that you guys have ever done.
Wow. Well, thank you. That, to me, that's like the highest compliment, because we have tried throughout, each record throughout the years to kind of maintain that core, that essence of, what we were when we started, which I think is important to kind of establish that identity for yourself early on. And we've always kind of tried to do that, and let's be clear, none of us knew what we were doing. It wasn't like we had some grand plan, you know what I'm saying? We were just kind of going, year by year, album by album, just trying to have fun and create stuff that we really liked. I mean, and, there was no, obviously this type of music didn't exist, up until like whatever, the mid 80s or so. So, there was no, we were kind of finding our way like everybody else in the scene, you know what I'm saying? And we were very fortunate to have made like really cool contacts back in the day with all the bands that were kind of up and coming at the time. So it was cool. We kind of built up a brotherhood, a camaraderie with a lot of people. We have a lot of friendships that we fostered throughout the years from that time, so it was very cool. But yeah, I mean, we did try to maintain that sound, that style, that vision throughout the years. And, I would hope that our fans recognize that and appreciate that. We didn't always hit the mark, but we've come close on some records. We don't always hit the mark, but I think, at the very least, it's Immolation from start to finish, from the first album to Acts of God. It's definitely Immolation, so at least, so I'm glad you recognize that. Thank you.
I would definitely say as well, to your credit, I mean, you guys have never been far off the mark. Never.
Oh, thank you.
I think again that's very rare, and I think another thing that's extremely rare. There's a very, very few bands who could do this for as long as you guys have done, and still produce a record that sounds as hungry and sounds as creative and inspired as Acts of God.
Thank you.
I think you kind of hinted at it earlier, but I spoke to Shane Embry last week, and I was trying to sort of get under the skin of why he is still so creatively active and what works for him. But my theory is this: I think unless you truly love this music and you're still listening to new bands and you're still getting excited, you're still getting that kind of 13-year-old during a Creator track, or hearing Venom for the first time, going fuck yes,
yeah.
I think unless if you don't feel that way anymore, I'm not sure how possible it is for you to write truly inspired music, at least of a particular style. Like if you're not inspired by the style, I'm not sure how you write music that sounds inspired, if you know what I mean.
I agree 100% with that. And it's true, you have to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy it, if you're not passionate about it, it shows. It's not at the level it should be, if it's any less than that, and yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, we still love what we do. We love every aspect of, being in this band, whether it's, writing the new material, collaborating on the lyrics, rehearsing, getting the songs down, going into the studio and recording them with the guys, touring. I mean, every aspect of this, we enjoy and have fun with. Some of it's a little more challenging and a little more tedious than other aspects of it, but in general, we do still have a lot of fun doing what we do. And and yeah, that's important. I mean, like I said before, like we are like, those teenage kids, who are like, discovering something new for the first time. This record, I mean, is an exceptional one in the sense that I think, Bob really delivered the goods big time on this one. I mean, I never have any doubts. I mean, I think there's a certain level of confidence, which I've been saying in interviews during this cycle, but it's true. There is a certain level of confidence that we bring to the table now after just having so many records under our belt. We've been around the block a number of times. So that gives you some level of confidence, and not in a cocky sense, just a confidence level in the sense that, hey, listen, I know at the end of the day, we'll make this happen. And that's always the way it is. It's like we start from nothing. And then once the process is done, we look back and like, wow, I don't know how we did that. And that's how it is with every record. And that's kind of how it was with this record. The fact that we had more time due to the pandemic, I think allowed for a lot of those pressures to kind of go away. We didn't have any timelines or deadlines or any kind of nonsense like that. Bob was just able to sit down and create and write without any kind of pressures. We knew in March of 2020, when New York State shut down and we were seeing countries all around the globe shut down, we knew this was going to be a long-term thing. It wasn't going to be in a few months. We knew in a few months we weren't going to be out of this. So, at that point we said, okay, let's sit down and just finish this record, do it the right way, not rush it. And that's what happened. Steve, our drummer, benefited the most. He had the most time to kind of more time than any other record that he's played on with us to kind of craft his parts and to kind of absorb the songs and to try different things out. We've never really had that luxury. I mean, that's our own fault. There's nothing else to blame but ourselves for that, because we're always like kind of, we use those deadlines as a catalyst to kind of light that fire, but this time was different. And I think it showed. I mean, I think the songs he delivered on this record were just amazing, and not because I'm in the band. If I was an outsider listening to this, or a friend, I'd say, wow, this is really good stuff, really strong material, and man, I think everybody in the band, Alex, Steve, myself, we were all like just blown away each time he would send us a demo track. We're like, wow, this is really good. This is really good. And even some of them, where you couldn't really hear the whole thing, was just guitars and some like programmed drums, but you still got a sense of, his vision, like, wow, I could see this song, when it's done being like something really, unique or something very epic, so, that was also a cool part of the process, just kind of hearing the songs as they came in and not really having to worry about deadlines. So yeah, there was, so anyway, I forgot what the original question was.
No, it's fine. I think so. So how I would describe this record, right? And it crystallized in my mind as you were explaining how it was made, because now it makes a lot more sense what I was feeling when I was listening to the album. I think it's the most expressive Immolation record I think I've heard you guys do since Kingdom of Conspiracy, which is not the popular choice for favorite, but it's my favorite Immolation record by far. But it's definitely the most expressive album I think you guys have done. And actually, to your point, maybe that time of being able to sort of spend just focused on the music without any distractions helps you to tap into that extra layer of, whatever you want to call it, expression, emotion, whatever the case may be. And that really comes out in the music. And it's interesting too, because I hear that in all of the performances across the record also. The drum sounds sensational. Your voice sounds, more kind of fiery than, it's ever done. And I want to ask you about your voice, because I've always, whenever I've thought, I'd love to speak to Ross from Immolation. There's one thing in particular I want to talk to you about, but I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, the record hits hard because of that degree of expressiveness and the whether it's despair, whether it's anger, whatever you choose to convey at the time.
It's all of that.
It's
really
there. Yeah.
And that's a good descriptive term, expressive. It is a very expressive album. It's a good way to describe it, and there was a lot of despair, a lot of, a lot of fear, a lot of inner darkness, a lot of anger. We kind of harnessed all of those emotions that we all experienced throughout that downtime, and like I said, we all kind of dealt with it in our own way. I mean, for us, obviously, the music was a huge escape, not just our music. I mean, music was my escape during the pandemic, just, listening to all types of music, but that would be my escape, listening to music. I kept busy around the house doing projects around the home. I like to work with my hands. So, we did a lot of, home renovations during that time because there's nothing else to do, So, between that, I went back to school, took a couple of classes, online classes, as just a fun thing to keep me, focused and, so I wasn't just rotting at home.
Yeah. What sort of classes did you do?
I took a sociology class and a criminology class, just two subjects that I've always been interested in, and I've done a lot of reading on my own throughout the years on these subjects. So yeah, it was just a fun thing to take college level classes with subjects that I'm very excited about. So, and it was great for me. It was fun. I had been out of the academic world since like the 80s. I literally stepped out of college and started, and jumped into Immolation back in 88, so I never finished my degree. So I figured at this point, hey, it was a challenge to see if I could jump back into that world comfortably, and B, just to do something creative with my time, and so that was another side little thing, and actually some of that actually worked its way into the lyrics. So it was a positive thing in the end. So, but yeah, so anyway, all of those emotions you described earlier kind of made their way into the lyrics and the songwriting, obviously, because it is a much fiercer, aggressive, darker record, more haunting, I think, than some of our, past releases. And it just has all of that. And I think that is a direct result of the time we lived through, for sure.
Yeah. And now, in year 34 of Immolation's existence, you've got Rolling Stone describing you as aging like a fine wine. You're on the cover of Decibel. Obviously, you're on Into the Necrosphere, the greatest metal podcast ever. But I mean, does it blow your mind that after over 3 decades, there is so much love for this band? And I would argue, I mean, you guys are, in terms of profile, I don't know about sales, but certainly in terms of profile, maybe it's just the circles I move in. But I mean, you guys are operating at the elite of the elite now. I mean, there's no question about it. I think, you probably single-handedly helped spawn the whole black and death metal genre, which is sort of a subgenre all on its own. But yeah, I mean, how does it feel when you see this response that the band is getting now?
It's weird. It's overwhelming for us. I mean, we have, the guys and I all have a, group text. We go back and forth, and any kind of, like the Rolling Stone article, for example, like that just blew our minds. I mean, it's like we're living in alternate reality Immolation land, and we have our little group chat, texting each other, and we're like, holy shit, Rolling Stone, what the hell? It's like when did this band become a cool band all of a sudden? It's like we were never the cool band. We were always like, the underground band, kind of forging ahead, kind of living outside all the confines of popular music and doing our thing. And we never think of it in those terms. It is overwhelming, because we never feel like we're that band. You know what I'm saying? We're a death metal band from New York, and we've struggled, for the, every bit of these 34 years. We've worked our asses off to keep things afloat, to keep things moving forward. So it is awesome. I mean, it's super cool to get recognized like that, especially from like a magazine, a publication like Rolling Stone. I mean, that's like to me, that's like insane. It's I have no words for that. It is overwhelming to us, and we just have no words for it. We're all like kind of like flabbergasted about that, like wow. And just the positive response. I mean, we're comfortable with the music. We all felt like this was a very strong album musically and lyrically. but that's just us. I mean, you got to realize we've been listening to these songs since 2018. We've been absorbed in this for so long, and then you get to that phase where you're listening critically for months and months and months and months. So to kind of step outside of that and to finally listen to these songs as a fan would, and to not be critical and just enjoy them, I could honestly say, wow, this is a really strong record, but that being said, like, the response is like over the top positive, and I'm happy. Believe me, we're all ecstatic that we're getting that kind of response, but it is kind of overwhelming. It's so unexpected. We're just like, wait a second. You're like, again, like, when did this band become this cool band all of a sudden? So whatever, but I will take it. I'm happy. Our fans know who we are. Our fans are I think will be pleasantly surprised with this record. It has a lot to offer our fans, both old and new. So that's kind of where, we can't get sidetracked by all the accolades, and that kind of stuff. We just, keep focusing on, like, our main focus now is, getting ready for this tour coming up with Imperial Triumphant and Mortiferum. We're psyched for that. We can't wait to do that. We can't wait to finally hit the stage. That's what we're about, man. I can't wait to just interact with the fans in that sense, to kind of have that give and take, that you can only get from a live situation. So I can't wait for that, man. That's what we're about right now. So.
Yeah. But that's the thing, actually, just talking about live, right? In terms of the Immolation star coming in, I remember the first time I saw you guys was with Malevolent Creation at Electroworks in London. And Electroworks is a total shithole, one of the biggest dives on the face of the earth. And I just remember standing there going, this band should be so much bigger than this crappy little venue with, like, I think there was about 200, 300 people there. And it is awesome, somebody who's been a fan of you guys for so long. It's great to see, you guys are really, particularly the last maybe 5-6 years, you're really getting your dues. Years ago, Rolling Stone would only have had a death metal band in, especially a band like you. If one of you went off the rails, killed his wife or something like that.
Yeah. So hey, look, I see it as a very positive thing for this scene in general. The fact that, forget about us, but I mean, like, he mentioned, other great bands in that article as well. The fact that they've identified this scene, is, to me, is awesome. You know what I'm saying? It's for the greater good of the scene. You know what I'm saying? To me, that's the way I see it. It's not about us. It's about, like, the whole scene in general, and it's good because I think the scene is thriving right now. I think there's a ton of killer young bands coming out from all over the world, that are really, like, taking this music forward into the next 10-20 years. It's like, we can only do our part, but there's other bands out there that are just killing it as well, and it's awesome to see. So the fact that a publication like Rolling Stone, recognize that, it, to me, is amazing. It's really cool, and, that's been the story of our lives. It's like, oh, these guys should be, doing better than this, but whatever. It doesn't matter. We never looked at it like that. I mean, those smaller venues, to me, are like, I prefer places like that. I prefer to see a show in a smaller venue, where you could really feel the energy from the stage. There's no barriers and no, separation. I mean, that's, to me, what music is about, being right there, so we never looked at it in those terms. I know you were like, I remember that club too. Dude, I totally remember that.
I was about to say, I like small venues, but that place fucking sucks. I was like, if you looked at the roof, there was, like, bits of cable just hanging out of the roof. So someone is going to get electrocuted if people get a little bit too excited.
Yeah, totally.
But you kind of mentioned newer bands and stuff like that. Are you guys conscious of the degree of influence that you've had? I mean, I mentioned black and death metal before, but as an example, one of the best records released for ages, in my opinion, the last Ulcerate record. I don't know whether you're familiar with the band, but I mean, whether they would admit it or not, I mean, there is such naked Immolation worship on that album. It's on all the stuff that they've done. But what's incredible for me is hearing that Immolation influence applied to a black metal aesthetic and hearing the kind of extremity that comes out of that. Like, if I listen to the last two PANZERFAUST records, for example, I mean, there is clearly, and I'm sure Brock would readily admit this, there's clearly a love for Immolation along with Mayhem and, whatever else influenced them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'll have a lot of friends say, hey, check these guys out. They're heavily inspired by you guys. And a lot of times I'll listen and I'm like, wow, these guys are great. I don't necessarily hear the Immo influence. I'll hear like other influences in there. So for me, it's always hard to pinpoint, like, or certain things are blatant, of course. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I could definitely see, them taking a cue from what we did here or there. But in general, I kind of hear everything and I'm just like, wow, yeah. I said, I don't hear it as much as you're hearing it, but I guess I come from a different perspective, being from in the band, I guess it's harder for me to see that. But yeah, I mean, it's always cool. It's cool when a band will reach out to us and say, hey, you guys have really, inspired us, or, I love this record, or, this record meant a lot to me. I mean, it's always cool. I mean, we never, we never look at it in those terms again. I mean, but it's, there's something cool to be said about having, I guess, been doing it for so long that younger bands are now kind of taking those cues that, not just us, but other bands from back in the day kind of, laid down. I see like a band like Suffocation or a band like Canum Clorus, I see their influence tremendously throughout the scene, how they've kind of, influenced a lot of bands. I could see that a lot. Incantation, I see a lot of Incantation style, a lot of bands. For me, it's harder to see our influence in certain bands, but it is cool though, man. It's cool to hear that. It's kind of mind blowing, because you never, again, we never see it that way. We're just kind of, trudging along and trying to get the next record out or trying to get ready for the next tour. It's always like, some one thing after the next for us. So we actually stop and step away for it and kind of look at it. It's like, wow, that is pretty cool, So
by the way, there's a tour package: Immolation, Suffocation, Broken Hope.
Oh, it'd be killer. Yeah.
I mean, that would be so fucking hard. It would be ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many like amazing lineups. You can just think of off the top of your head, like, oh, this would be great. This would be great. And like, believe me, I'd be into all of those, touring with like any bands that I've been a fan of and friends. At this point in the game, we're trying to, put together tours that are exciting to the fans. This round, with Imperial Triumphant and Mortiferum, we have two completely different, younger up and coming bands, but I mean, both unique in their own way, and I think all the bands on the package are different. And that's kind of what I look for in a package, like, not all the same, but like, kind of different flavors, and you mentioned like that whole, the Black and Death scene. And I think, the fact that we kind of straddle that line and could kind of, jump into both of those areas, really well with what we do, I think allows for an interesting touring package, because you can draw from, the more black metal bands and the more, and the death metal side of things. So, and I think, we all came from the same place, it's just different interpretations of that, you know what I'm saying? And it's all dark. It's all extreme dark, heavy music at the end of the day. So it's always cool to put together a package that has different flavors on it, So
yeah. Speaking of extreme, so your voice, right? Because it was the 30th birthday of Dawn of Possession last year, I went back and I listened to that record. And again, you go through the Immolation discography, and there's definitely a development that happens with your voice that I feel like the voice as we know it now really sort of became entrenched on Failures for Gods. But talk to me about how that happened, how you came upon that voice, because it's a very, I don't know whether you use a similar technique to anybody else in death metal, but it's, your voice is so unique and so stand out, and it's also, it's incredibly deep, gruff, brutal, but your words are really well enunciated. You can hear every single thing that you're saying.
Yeah. And that's intentional. I've always been a lyric guy. I said this a million times in interviews, but I was the kid that would like, buy a new record, come home, put it on the vinyl player, and sit there with the lyric sheet and go through the whole record, song by song, read the lyrics, try to, get into the musicians' heads and see what they meant by the song. So I always loved lyrics, so it was always important for me to create lyrics that were intelligent and made sense and made the listener think. And with that, I always felt it was important for people to understand what I was saying without having the lyric sheet in front of them. So I've always tried throughout the years to keep it deep and brutal and insane sounding, but still articulated to the point where you could understand. So that was always intentional and always important. I was originally not meant to be the singer of the band. I joined Rigor Mortis as a bass player to replace Andrew, and it wasn't until 2 weeks before our very first show together as a band, as Immolation, in May of '88, that I was told, hey, we think you should be the singer. You should probably sing for the first show. You could do it. Everybody had to, gave me the vote of confidence. So they all believed in me. I didn't believe in me. I was like,
I was about to say, how many weeks in advance of that show did they tell you that?
About 2 weeks, literally.
Oh, great. So lots of time to prep.
Yeah, so I was still learning how to play these songs. We had a bunch of covers thrown in, so we were doing, I think at the time, Morbid Visions. We were doing Charred Remains by Autopsy. We were doing Chapel of Ghouls by Morbid Angel, just to fill in the gaps with our set. We did Regurgitated Guts off Scream Bloody Gore. So those were the covers we were doing at the time. And mind you, these were covers of bands that nobody else heard of. I mean, when I mentioned Death and Morbid Angel Sepultura, these are iconic names right now. But back then, nobody knew who these bands were. There was still very much underground scene. Autopsy, nobody knew any of this stuff except for our clique. So these are the types of covers that we were playing. So yeah, I had 2 weeks to kind of learn all the songs, on the bass and then sing. So, originally my voice was more of a raspier kind of voice, what I'm saying? It wasn't as deep. I think the deepness came once I kind of got comfortable in that mode and I was able to kind of really go for it. In the beginning, it was just kind of like, just trying to get through it and to try to, get, I think my earlier vocal style kind of was more along the lines of like a Mike Browning type of vibe, you know what I'm saying? Which I loved. I liked Mike's vocals on, that first, unreleased Morbid Angel record, epic. So anyway, over the years, it just evolved and got deeper and deeper and deeper. I was trying to get it, as deep as I could, but still be, articulate enough to understand everything I was saying. So regarding techniques and all that stuff, I no clue. Just do it.
Whatever Satan inspires me.
Yeah, I mean, no clue. I mean, I can't bullshit everybody and act like there's some big technique behind this, and there is. I don't know what I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I just get up there and I do it. You know what I'm saying? I do know I need some lead time before anything, before a tour, before we go into the studio. And actually, you mentioned on the new record, I think the vocals on the new record came out as good as they did because I had about 3 or 4 days before I laid down the tracks, once the lyrics were written, to kind of stay, the guys would go into the recording studio during the day and I would stay back at the band house for about 4 hours or so in the morning and just go through the songs, on my computer program with my mic and just record my vocals to the demo, tracks that we had, just to kind of get a feel of, placement, cadence, where I was going to do a scream, how things, gelled within the tracks themselves. So I usually don't have that luxury, to be honest with you. Usually, like, I'm writing the lyrics, I'm kind of like going over in my head, and then I'm behind the mic recording them, and any changes we have to make or something sounds funky or it's not working, we do on the fly right there. This time around, I had that lead time, so I was really comfortable with the songs, I guess, with the, how they were going to be sung. I was familiar with the lyrics at that point. So I guess that helped. That familiarity helped. I guess, the vocal performance, be what it was on this record. I guess, that's the only difference between any of the other records and this one, is that I had a few days to kind of just go through these songs, and identify what I liked and what I didn't like, and kind of change it before I actually got in there. So when I did the vocals for this record, I got them all done in one day except for 2 songs. So I did what do we have, 13 of like songs that aren't intros.
Mm.
So I did like 11 of the songs on the one day. We started about 10 in the morning. By like 4 in the afternoon, I was done. And then the next day I did the other 2 tracks, only because they were a little squirrely for me. I wasn't sure how things were gonna, fit in there. And I just needed a little more time with those. And then I got in there the next morning, and those actually went pretty quick. I went kind of part by part and just kind of went through the trickier parts. And Bob was in there with me, and making always the best suggestions to help me kind of get through it. And Bob always had some great ideas, as far as always has great ideas, I should say, as far as like certain patterns. When he's writing the musical parts, he'll have an idea of how the vocals will kind of lay over those parts. And sometimes I'll hear those parts and I'll have a completely different idea. And so we don't, sometimes we'll be on 2 different pages, so it's a matter of coming together and say, all right, we'll try it both ways, and we'll just kind of see which one we're feeling. And at the end of the day, sometimes he'll just kind of say, hey, listen, you're the guy who's got to be singing them. If you're comfortable with it this way, leave it that way. But sometimes he's a little more adamant, and then I'll kind of understand what he's going for, and we'll kind of compromise, and I'll kind of do it how he's doing. And that happened a couple of times on this record as well. But at the end of the day, it's all for the greater good. It's never about, hey, it's my stuff or it's your stuff. It's about what makes these songs as good as they can be. All that ego shit doesn't exist in this band at all. It's about what makes the songs as best as they could be. So so that's kind of to kind of take you through the vocal process. That's kind of how it is.
Do you find you have to do a lot of maintenance on your voice when you're on the road? Do you like is it something that tires your throat out, or tires your vocal cords out, the way that you sing?
No, I think I'm fortunate in that sense. I think when I have lapses and I don't sing is when it becomes a problem for me. Like I said, I need that lead time. I give myself at least a month of practicing almost daily, like 4 to 5 times a week.
Thought you were going to say straight whiskey drink before
yeah. So that's how it is for me. Like before a tour, I've been rehearsing for this tour now just to get the vocals where they need to be comfortable. I like to be on that stage and just be able to go on autopilot, not have to think about what I'm doing. I want to just be in the moment and not have to worry about, oh, what's the next line, or I want to go up there and be super comfortable, because when I'm comfortable, then I can enjoy myself. And and then the fans get what they're paying for. They get the show that we're there to give them. I don't want to be constrained by my own head. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You want total command of your instruments.
Exactly.
Your voice kind of being the one that's most pronounced. What I've always loved about your vocals, you have a real kind of you've always had a great rhythm and a great kind of swagger in your voice. And the best example for me of that, I mentioned Kingdom of Conspiracy previously, but was the one of the lines in All That Awaits Us, where you go, is it truly darkest before the light, or is darkness all that awaits us? But the way that you phrase that, you kind of go, but is darkness, and then there's a split second pause, all that awaits us. It's such a great hook in that song, and it's like whenever like if you think about the most memorable line of your favorite vocalists. Like if I think of my favorite David Vincent line, I'll have something probably off of, Covenant. Or if I think of Dear Side, my favorite Glenn line without a doubt is on Dear Side when he yells, kill him. But it's like, but that to me is like, that's definitive Ross Dolan is but it's darkness, all that awaits us. Genius. But I mean, is that again? It's the rhythm and all that sort of stuff. Where does that come from? Is it influences you've had external to to metal, death metal? Where does that kind of come from?
Good question. I haven't really given it much thought. I mean, obviously, we've we're all extreme music fans, fans of extreme music, fans of all genres of music, more or less. So, I guess when you're doing it, like you mentioned, that it's funny because I got a side story about that line you mentioned in All That Awaits Us, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, again, when I'm kind of roughing out the vocals and writing stuff, and I'm kind of, in my head, kind of going over these parts, I guess you kind of feel it. The music kind of, leads you in a sense, and you kind of follow that. That part specifically, Bob and I had talked about that part because we wanted to kind of have that line, like you said, kind of come in and just kind of say what it said and kind of linger there before that last part of the line going into that next section. So yeah, we do kind of sit down and kind of talk about these things, or even as I'm doing those parts in the studio, he'll say, what if you try it like this, and I'll say, oh, that's a good idea. So a lot of times Bob will just kind of say, hey, try it like this, ba 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 ba, or things like that. So yeah, I do rely on that input from him as well. Even Paul in the studio, when we're tracking, he'll have some, some cool input. Why don't you try like this, Ross? Or maybe try this, or this is getting kind of weird. Maybe you could try. So yeah, I rely on those kind of that input to kind of to guide me as well, because sometimes I'm not always on track with that. But for that part in particular, it was kind of a funny story. I was recording that part, and I came in and I was off time on that part because we have the metronome in there, so I kind of have that in there just to kind of keep my place, so I don't get lost, because I'm not playing. When I'm playing live, the bass kind of keeps me in place, but in the studio I don't have that, so I'm just kind of
you
listening.
can almost tell that by the way you kind of hold the bass and you sort of move when you're vocaling. You can tell you keeping time through the way you're playing.
Yeah, it helps me out tremendously. So but with that part, I laid down the lines and I was off. I was off timing, a good amount. So the guys came back to me and said, no, you're off. It should be here. You got to move it up a little bit, And I said, oh, okay, no problem. Because I was hearing it one way and they were hearing it another way. So I said, okay. So I'd go back in and I'd say, I got it, no problem. I go back in there and I'd lay it down the exact same way, same cadence, but in the same wrong timing. And they're like, well, it's wrong timing again. Try it again. So literally, I must have gone through this part about 20 times. And every time I would nail it, but in the wrong timing, like in the timing that I was hearing. Complete. And like it got to a point where like they say, all right, one more time, let's give it a go. You got it this time. And I go in and I do it the same way. And they'd stop and I just hear just laughter like coming out of the other room. They're like, he fucked it up again. And I wasn't getting pissed. I was laughing because I thought it was so funny. I was like, oh my God, I can't get this fucking part, man. I'm having like just a malfunction in my head here, just like like brain fog or something. So what happened is I said, hey, listen, man, I don't know. I'm having some kind of malfunction here. I'm just not understanding this. Just slide it over. So Paul slid those lines over to where they should be so I could hear them in the part. I'm just like, I said, okay. So I tried it a couple more times, didn't quite nail it. And I said, you know what? That performance was perfect. Just leave that slide over. And that's what we did for that part, So I had that template to at least rehearse to. So, obviously when we played it live, I nailed it, but man, it was just so funny in the studio. I could not nail that part. And it's crazy that you mentioned that part, because that part was the bane of my existence for that like half hour or so, just to do those lines. It was insane, dude. But anyway, that was kind of a tangent.
But it is a part that just screams out of that record. I mean, the whole album is fantastic, but like I said, it just screams out at you, at least to me. I was going to ask you about that album though. I mean, are you guys getting religious tax breaks yet for the prophecy that you dropped on that album? Because I think it was either you or it was Bob that described it as your most unpolitical record. But I was listening to it again a while back and I was like, Jesus Christ, like the last 2-3 years, there's some shit on this album that really rings true if you apply it to, 2021, 2020, 2022 as well.
It does. I mean, even stuff on Atonement. I mean, we're not a political band. Let's be clear about that. We've never been a political band, but unfortunately, a lot of the craziness that we see happening in the world is because of the divisiveness in politics, the divisiveness in religion, the divisiveness in all these kind of forces that, just serve not to unite, but to divide people,
Yeah.
So obviously it makes its way into the lyrics in that sense. I hate politics, I can't stand politics really, but it's true. It was the most unpolitical political Immolation album ever. And it wasn't really inspired by politics or anything of that sort. It was really kind of inspired by 1984, the book 1984. And, you know, things that George Orwell like tapped into back then in the late 40s, early 50s, you know, we kind of saw unfolding around us. And that's kind of what became Kingdom of Conspiracy. And we kind of had some more of that kind of bleed into Atonement, you know, with songs like The Distorting Light and When the Jackals Come. All these songs are very specific in what they're about, but they do touch on what was happening in the world, you know, in the years leading up to that point and after. And a lot of people have come up to me in more recent years and been like, hey man, the stuff you were writing back then is like all kind of happening now. It's like almost you guys had a crystal ball. And it's like, you know, I'd rather not say, yeah, we were right on that one. You know, I just, that's something you don't want to be right on. It's just kind of a sad commentary on the world, you know, that we could kind of foresee these things unfolding and write about them. And then they kind of happen. It's like, yeah, it's, you know, you kind of hope that those things would kind of be averted and not happen. You know, that's the point.
But I think I definitely sense your point in terms of, you know, you can hate religion, you can hate politics, you almost, you know, and a record like that could be written almost from the point of view of this is the outcome of all of those divisive forces.
Absolutely.
By the way, I don't know whether you saw, but 1984 recently got a trigger warning on I think it's the University of Northampton over here that gave it a trigger warning and said it contains explicit material that may upset certain students. I was like,
I don't understand. I mean, that's a very important book to read, especially now. I mean, what's happened in the last 10 years or so, or even longer, or really since 9/11. Everything kind of changed with 9/11, you know, with the Patriot Act over here kind of giving more power to places that shouldn't have all that power, you know, and kind of lessens the restrictions on wiretapping and surveillance and all that stuff. So yeah, without getting into a rant about all that stuff, that's kind of, I think, the point at which everything changed, and it's kind of accelerated, you know, in some ways since then. So yeah, those records reflect that, you know, those events unfolding, and that's kind of where we were when we were writing those albums. Every record kind of, you know, establishes where we were in our heads at that point in time when we wrote those records, and they reflect, I guess, the zeitgeist of that time, you know. And that it's no different for Acts of God. Acts of God is the same way. I mean, it's just kind of, you know, we take a critical look, you know, and being from New York, we're very cynical about everything. So, you know, you kind of take a very cynical and look at everything around you, and, you know, and it's, a lot of things I see just disgust me, you know, to the point where like I feel I have to write about them. You know, certain things, you know, we've written about 20 years ago are still happening now, you know. So yeah, I mean, you know, and it's, you know, I don't think, you know, we're writing about things that are happening. We're not writing about fantasy stuff, you know. So anybody who says to me, hey, I don't like your anti-religious stance, it's like, well, you know, the stance is about the corruption within these institutions and all the horrible things they've perpetrated throughout the years, and even now, things that are happening now. So, you know, what, you know, I don't knock people for their beliefs, but, you know, you can't be blind to what's happening within these institutions and things that are getting swept under the rug. So,
well, you know, institutions should also be able to stand up to criticism and stand up to some degree of scrutiny, right? If they're worth anything.
And make positive changes, you know, and take that criticism and to say, hey, you know, someone has shined a light on this very dark part of our past, or something that dark that's happening, you know, beneath the shadows here. You know, maybe we should address that. But there's just this arrogance, you know, because of whatever power and just blind hubris that, you know, prevents them from making these changes, you know, and you know, and they're emboldened by the people who are behind that. You know what I'm saying? So it's, you know, it just, to me, it's just frustrating as hell, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, without getting into all that, so yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of that is, you know, is reflected in the lyrics, you know, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of making the changes, I think there's the saying, one of the best sayings I've ever heard is, show me the incentive and I'll show you the behavior. And there's the incentive structure is not there for many of those institutions to make the change. If you think of the news media, the incentive is there to get clicks, so they just write whatever cockeyed nonsense comes up. And funnily enough, actually, I'm busy rewatching The Wire at the moment, and that was the last season was shot in 2007 or 2008, I believe. In there, they've got one of the side stories, part of the kind of side plots is that they have a newspaper writer coming up with all these made up quotes and just total fake news. And it's how he eventually gets found out. And I was like, Jesus, it's, you could kind of see they were already starting to comment on it, but just think about there, it was still an anomaly. Now it's basically, a given. You take whatever you see on the news, regardless of the channel, you take with a pinch of salt.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm glad you brought up the media, because the media is, again, like politics, like religion, it's super divisive, especially right now with the internet. I mean, you have so much information to kind of sift through and vet. Most people just don't have the time for that nonsense. So you just kind of, you go to your familiar spots and you read, the headlines, and you kind of absorb that, and that's your world, So yeah, if you're not vetting stuff and you don't know what's fact and what's not fact, the media is divisive in so many ways. I mean, the way elections are presented these days, it's like you're watching a sporting event. It's like the red team versus the blue team. It's very intentional, but the motivator, unfortunately, behind everything we're talking about is the almighty dollar, the green. Money is behind all of this. Unfortunately, it's not about what's right. It's not about doing the right thing. It's not about making positive changes. It's just how much money we can accumulate in power, unfortunately. And you see that play out time and time again in all these institutions. It's just a sad state of affairs, but I don't think it's anything new. I think it's always been like that. I mean, you can go back 100 years and you see, how cyclical history is in so many ways,
And I think also, when it comes to the media, you mentioned money, they certainly profit off of the misery that they foment, right? So again, whether you're a Fox News diehard who first thing that you do in the morning is like, right, what's the headlines? Democrats, and or you're like CNN Republicans. It's like people don't realize that at a very base level. I think certain emotions or emotional states are addictive. Anger is an addicting state, and you get it in relationships as an example, where one person in the relationship is almost addicted to stress. So you'll see replicating patterns of behavior. They'll go from one failed relationship to the next because they're so addicted to that feeling of stress. They can't be in a relationship where everything is plain sailing. They have to create the drama because they're so used to that feeling.
Absolutely. It's just a human thing. I mean, that's just the way it is. We get kind of locked into these patterns, and we get addicted to these feelings that, these chemicals that our brain releases, whether it be for stress or this or that. And, we get locked into these patterns. I mean, all of us. I mean, I'm not excluded from that. I if I really sit down and look at my life, it's like, okay, I could see the patterns very clearly. It's very difficult to break away from those patterns. That's the challenge right there, I haven't mastered that yet. So, hopefully one day, but, I think it's important to understand that, fear sells, this kind of discourse sells, they know people will always stop on the side of a road to look at an accident. That's the kind of stuff people are, want to see or attracted to, unfortunately, so the media knows that. So, you see nothing but negativity and crap on the media, constantly, fanning those flames. And it's a sad state of affairs. I have friends and family that run the gamut, politically, how they view the world, and I refuse to get into arguments about politics or religion. It's not that important where I need to make enemies over that kind of shit, because that's what it is. It's garbage at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? That should not be part of the human experience. Politics and all this stuff, leave that for the wealthy elites to kind of play their games. We write about humanity, about real struggles that people have, across the board. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're from. I mean, this is stuff that affects all of us. And that's kind of what we try to focus on, from like a regular person's perspective, how these things affect us, you know, whether it's divisiveness of the media or the shenanigans, you know, in the religious institutions or whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? It's not, obviously it's not a pleasant or happy subject to write about, but, you know, I've always been more attracted to the darker things, you know, whether it be darker books or novels or darker movies or darker subjects or darker music, you know, that's the stuff to me that always was more honest. That's the stuff that was always, I think had more impact because it showed you the extremes of how things could go, you know, in order for you to say, hey, wow, that's kind of fucked. You know, we don't want to go to that place. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
you know,
So I heard Jordan Peterson talk about this once, and I think he was 100% correct. He was saying it's important when you read books like that or you see things like that. The part of what makes it so trying to find the word now. It'll come to me. But part of what makes it useful to do those things is you're forced to confront the idea that anybody, you know, under the right set of circumstances and the right, you know, right stroke wrong environment, or, you know, the right external stresses could potentially become like that, or has the capacity to do those things. And once you're forced to confront that, you're able to kind of deal with your own or keep your own worst instincts in check. You know,
absolutely.
it's kind of like, you know, knowing how the Matrix works. I don't like the Matrix, but you know what I mean? It's when you see how the Matrix operates. I think another thing you mentioned, always being attracted to kind of the darker side of stuff. I've been exactly the same way. And as I've grown older, what I've come to realize is I feel like a lot of that stuff and seeing a lot of those things, my older, more seasoned years, it has definitely made me appreciate life an awful lot more, and the people close to me and the people that I love a lot more. It you know, dare say, it's also made me probably a little bit more sentimental about certain things, because I think you might have said this earlier in the conversation, you realize that, you know, life can just, you know, come to an end, you know, you know, in the blink of an eye, you know, whether it's through war, whether it's through, you know, some fucking axe wielding lunatic, you know, that just one day knocks on the wrong door.
Yeah.
But it definitely does make you appreciate the beauty and the finality of life a lot more than I think people that don't. And I think there's a humility that's created by that as well, right? Because you realize in the grand scheme of things, you are a, you know, mustard burp in the annals of history.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that, you know, it does bring a lot of humility. I mean, you know, you realize how very small you are in the big scheme of things, you know. But, you know, I lost track there. I had a thought and then I just kind of lost it. Excuse me. Sorry.
No,
it happens. Having a senior moment. Well, you said a lot of cool things there, and I was like, in my head, I was like all over the place. But yeah, I agree with you there. It does because you do appreciate, especially during the pandemic. That's what I was going to get to. You know, this was such a weird time, and not that I didn't appreciate those things in my life. I most certainly did. You know, but I think you appreciate things even more when you see how dark things could get. You know, and you really appreciate just those, you know, those moments where you could be with family and friends, and, you know, it doesn't have to be anything, just a moment together, talking, sitting, having a drink or whatever, you know, things like that. You appreciate stuff like that a lot more. And listen, you know, when you're younger, you know, you have a different mindset, you know, you're invincible, you know, in your 20s and 30s, but, you know, in your 50s, you kind of understand like, hey, you know, this isn't going to go on forever. You know, I've been very fortunate up to this point to be able to kind of live the way I've lived. I've never, you know, I don't know. I've lived a certain way to kind of not, what's the word I'm looking for?
Not have age catch up to you.
Yeah, that, but also to kind of not lose sight as to what is important. Like family is extremely important to me. My close relationships, all that stuff means the most to me. You know, everything else is whatever nonsense. You know, I'm not the material person. I'm not about acquiring things and this and that. I'm all about the experience. That's why I think I love what we do with the music, because it's about the journey with this. And I've said this a million times, and, you know, without again, sounding cliche or corny, but it is truly about the journey. It's about the relationships you foster throughout the years of doing this, the places you travel, the connections you make on that stage with like a crowd full of people, speaking to those people afterwards, getting to shake their hands and having them say, hey, your music means this to me. It helped me get through a very difficult time in my life, as music helped us all through those crazy teen years and such. So yeah, I mean, it's just I've always kind of appreciated those things, and I never really lived in a way that didn't put the important things in life, on top of that pedestal where they belong, so that's all I was trying to get out of that.
Well, dude, I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Me too, man. I thought it was a great conversation, man. It's always cool when you could have, a talk like that where it doesn't seem like an interview. We're just kind of talking, it was great. Awesome.
That's the best compliment you can give me.
Absolutely.
As
that was a pleasure. It was like I was
talking.
It's like talking to an old bro from like years ago, just catching up. That's exactly what it's like, man. I appreciate it.
Hopefully we bump into each other down the road again at some point. Man, I'm so excited about what I think Acts of God is going to do for you guys. It is a phenomenal record. For me, definitely one of the definite front runners for one of the best records of the year, without a doubt.
Cool. Well,
the bar has been set early on, so
we shall see, dude. Man. Yeah, everybody's been pissed at us now. Anyway,
right, man.
Thanks,
Take
brother.
Care of yourself.
Be good.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Crusade.
thank you so much to Ross for not only being an extraordinarily nice guy, but for his time and also for putting together, alongside his cohorts in Immolation, one of the most incredible records that band has ever done. You know, I say that as a fan of Immolation for a very long time, as you most likely picked up over the course of the conversation. But it really is, in my view, quite comfortably amongst the top 3 things that band has ever done. I'll talk more about it probably next week, nearer the release date. But trust me, if you're an Immolation fan, it's time to break out the old brown bands when it comes to your upping your anticipation levels for this record. Hopefully as well, that will not be the last time that Ross is on the podcast. I just had an absolute blast talking to him, and I left the conversation being an even bigger fan of the band, which... it's the best when you have those types of interviews or those types of chats. So hopefully it's not the last time, and he'll be on Into the Necrosphere again at some point down the road. But let's talk now about Chaos Perversion, a band out of Chile in South America. They have just put out their second EP, Petrified Against the Emanation. It is out on Sentient Ruin Laboratories, and Sentient Ruin Laboratories did put out something else in 2021 that I also really, really liked, which made me think that they're starting to become a label worth taking note of. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but in fact, actually now I know it was Spire, who was on the top 20 of 2021. Anyway, Chaos Perversion are a 2-man band. This is their second EP. The first one came out in 2019. It was called Entangled by the Roots of Death. Petrified Against the Emanation, I think, is a great step up from that, both in terms of songwriting and in terms of production. Style-wise, this is a great example of that enduring influence that I mentioned Immolation having when I was talking to Ross. It's not kind of the only thing that you'll hear on here. I mean, there's definitely hints of early Grave. I can hear a couple of whiffs of Left Hand Path on here as well. But after really creepy, dark intro that sets the tone for the record really, really well, they just drop you straight into Riff City, and the guitars are in your face. The drums are completely chaotic and hateful and violent, and the vocals are so reverb heavy they may as well have been recorded in a medieval torture chamber. They are also completely unintelligible, which kind of works for this band. But there are 4 proper tracks on offer alongside an intro and an outro. I think every single one works really, really well. There's enough variety going on here to make it interesting. I think the vibe, which, as I said before, that intro sets really, really well, I think carries throughout the record, and makes it a very absorbing listen. And even though it's only 19 minutes long, you will definitely find yourself wanting to go back to it again and again. And if nothing else, it makes me super excited about whatever this band is going to do next. I mean, certainly that first full length is going to have a lot to live up to against this EP in particular. I am going to lay a track off of this album, or off of this EP, on you right now. This is a song called Absorption Ascension Under the Vampiric Connection. You just listened to Chaos Perversion off of the EP Petrified Against the Emanation, released by Sentient Ruin Laboratories on January 21st. Do go and check it out on Bandcamp. And if you buy yourself anything, as always, remember to let them know where you discovered them. That song was called Absorption Ascension Under the Vampiric Connection. I was about to say, one thing that also massively counts in their favor is they do love them a long song title, because the next song on the record is called From the Ominous Funerary Miasma, Initiation by Semi-Trance and Praxis of the Grotesque, which is fucking brilliant. I mean, I made jokes last week about not liking bands who have full-length sentences for names, but bands who have full-length sentences for song titles are okay by me. I want to talk now about Hlamdomrack, and I do apologize in advance to both band and non-Servium records if I ever raped that song or that band name. This was a record that actually came out last year in September. I don't know how on earth it flew under my radar. Marco was the one who suggested I give it a listen, and he did so right before the Christmas special. So we actually spoke a little bit about this album on the Christmas special already, but I've spent a bit more time with it since, and it really is absolutely goddamn sensational. If you like black metal that is heavily folk-inspired, epic, has loads of lengthy, acoustic parts, parts where you can imagine a spangly, thin nerd weeping beside the river, this is not the music for you. This is extremely aggressive, extremely precise, very modern sounding and unrelentingly hateful black metal. And that is the best way to describe it. They are now 3 albums deep into their career after starting in 2011. There have been 2 changes to the lineup, one being a new vocalist by way of Talon. And then they also have Dominator, the legendary black metal drummer, sitting behind the drum kit. And, I did say this on social media, but I personally think that he turns in probably his best work, yeah. And I know, again, that's saying a lot. He's been in a lot of big-time bands, but, this is something quite exquisite. Another thing that is quite exquisite is the guitaring of Ev Generator, who I believe writes most of the music as well. He, not only knows his way around a very classically Swedish black metal riff, I would also say brought into modern times, but he really knows his way around a guitar solo. And I mean, there are some pretty major Eddie Van Halen influenced guitar solos that come flying out at you on this album. Not least of all the opening track, which I'm about to play for you right now. This is Phosphoros Insignia. The album is Archaic Sacrifice, the band is Domrak, and that track is called Phosphorus Insignia. This is one of those black metal records that when I hark back to the glory days of the Nuclear Blast catalogs, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but there were, I think it was Osmos Records used to have a big banner up at the top of all of their ads, and it would say "Not for pussies." And I do think this band is not for pussies. Top notch, just absolutely fucking nasty black metal from start to finish. And one thing I should have said as well, it's a record which you'd be hard pressed afterwards to pick out a favorite track. It's not like Master of Puppets, when the first time you heard it, if you're like me, you heard The Thing That Should Not Be, or you heard Orion, and you were like, oh, that's my song. This is one that works as an end-to-end experience, and 36 minutes and 36 seconds, which makes it possibly extra evil. It's just short enough for you to consume in kind of single helpings like that. But great stuff. And once again, name is in the Bandcamp link is in the description to the podcast. So make sure that if you do go and check them out and you buy yourself anything, let them know who sent you. Let's change gears just a tad right now and head over to Metal Storm to see what the latest metal news headlines have to tell us this week. First headline on Metal Storm: Creator hate Uber Alles on the way. I am giddy with excitement. Actually, I'm not giddy with excitement because I listened to that opening single, or this first single they've released, and it is absolutely terrible. Yes, it's heavy and it's well produced and reasonably well played, but they lost me as soon as I heard them sing "Don't Tell Me How to Live My Life." I mean, Milei is a very nice guy, but Jesus Christ, man, you are how old? 54, and you're singing the lyrics of a fucking 12-year-old. I mean, that is literally the kind of shit that when you start a band when you're 12 years old, that's the first lyric you write. Don't tell me how to live my life. So, I mean, and Creator, for me, I know this is heresy to a lot of people, but my personal opinion is the last record of theirs that I really liked was Violent Revolution, and that was their 10th. It came out in 2001. This is their 15th, and I don't know, just sounds mediocre to me. I had to call up Marco straight away after I heard it to tell him about the day that Creator shamed and embarrassed his nation. Rivers of Nile Terrestria US tour confirmed. Rivers of Nile are excited to announce a string of headlining shows over the United States. I bet you any money this will be followed in 3 months' time by Rivers of Nile Terrestria US tour postponed, and then in a couple of months or a couple of weeks, Terrestria US tour cancelled. I have no idea why this fucking charade of lockdowns, mask mandates, all of this sort of thing continues to carry on, even in the face of countless bits of evidence now coming out saying that much of it doesn't work. I don't know whether any of you guys saw, but this week Johns Hopkins University released a study where they essentially said that lockdown was or had no real effect on the public health, so meaning it didn't work, which I'm very surprised people aren't more up in arms about, because if you think about the damage that lockdown did to society, I mean it's fucking terrifying. But naturally the mainstream media would largely ignore that. There was also and I'm trying to actually find the headline so I don't fuck it up. And I'm on Google, so I would also imagine that as I'm trying to find it, they probably won't let me see it. Although, actually, no, here we go. So there was a non-clinical Japanese trial that says ivermectin shows antiviral effect against COVID. And all this time, I had bought into the headline that ivermectin was causing people with gunshot wounds to die outside the hospital because the emergency rooms were clogged up with people who had overdosed on horse medicine. I'm not going to talk about the whole Joe Rogan thing again. I mean, safe to say, I saw that Harry and Meghan had now joined the debate, which, I mean, game over for Joe. But I did watch Real Time with Bill Maher, as I am prone to do actually last night. I'm recording this on a Saturday. And he made the very good point in his monologue at the end that freedom of speech has allowed an awful lot of misinformation to float around, namely yours. And by yours, he said, or he was referring to specifically the medical industrial complex and the political classes. Because what is more misinformation? Maybe questioning a couple of things, having experts on who have differing views, or just outright saying, when you get the vaccine, the virus stops with you. And I believe that was Anthony Dumbass Fauci that said that, and Biden has said stuff like that. They seem to get things wrong an awful lot more than Rogan gets things wrong. The difference is, unlike Joe Rogan, most of the people railing against him for quote-unquote misinformation never seem to want to take any responsibility for the things that they do get wrong. But anyways, like I said, don't want to go into another big rant about that, nor do I really want to talk about the fact that Slipknot has a new album ready for release in the spring. That last song that they put out was total and utter muck. Watain detailed next record and launch first single. I have not listened to the single yet, but as some of you know, I am not the biggest fan of Watain. I have tried so many times to get into this band, and I just cannot. And I know Mike is a big fan. I know Cheyenne is a big fan. Probably a lot of you guys listening love it. But it just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't do anything for me. That being said, it says here Swedish devil worshippers Watain have released a brand new single, The Howling, in preparation of their upcoming 7th studio album, The Agony and Ecstasy of Watain. The latter recorded at Necromorbus Studios outside of Uppsala, Sweden, and will be available through Nuclear Blast Records on the 29th of April 2022. So one of the few bands whose contracts weren't absconded with by Atomic Fire Records. Like I said, not heard the song yet, and who knows? One day I may well sit on this podcast and go, I was wrong. Actually, Watain are fantastic, but I'm not so sure. I wouldn't bet money on that day coming anytime soon. I wasn't going to bet money on Abath putting out any new music after I saw, I think it was the video of him in Argentina staggering around like a stunard on the on the stage. But anyway, he's back and has announced a new album called Dread Reaver, which will be out on March the 25th via Season of Mist. There's been 2 songs that have been put out so far, and I will say both I've quite enjoyed. I think the last 2 Abath records were kind of like the musical equivalent of a Fast and Furious movie, in that there were a lot of bells, whistles, bangs, explosions, but not much by way of substance. And I found myself liking them for a hot minute, and then kind of just they would just kind of fade into the distance, fade into obscurity in my regular rotation. But I mean, I'm glad he's back. I hope that his personal demons are behind him, although rumor has it that that is not so. But either way, if you're an Abath fan, I suspect you're going to really like this, and I know there are plenty of you about. Plus it's a Season of Mist release, so naturally they're going to get some love coming from old Jackson. Let's see if there's anything else worth talking about. Funeral Winds joined forces with Osmose Productions. Black metal one-man project Funeral Winds, whose most recent claim to fame is that they were number 14, I believe it was, on the Into the Necrosphere Top 20 of 2021. Have joined forces with the French label Osmose Productions and sealed a new record deal. The band's 7th full-length is currently in the making. Sensational news, because that last album was fucking fantastic. But also, in keeping with my comment earlier about the old Osmose banner that proudly read, "Not for pussies," this is probably the best pairing of band and label that I can think of. So well done to Funeral Winds, and for sure looking forward to that 7th record. That last one, if you've not listened to it yet, fucking sort your life out. It was absolutely fantastic. Megaforce Records co-founder John Zazula passed away. John Zazula, who co-founded longtime independent record label Megaforce Records with his late wife Marsha back in 1982, has passed away at the age of 69. Megaforce released the first 2 Metallica albums, Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. The label also put out the Anthrax debut album Fistful of Metal in 1984. Some of the other metal acts that have collaborated with the label include Overkill, Ministry, Testament, Merciful Fate. This was very sad news. I had heard an interview with John on the Chris Jericho podcast about a year ago, and I tried reaching out to him, through whatever means I could find. Unfortunately, didn't get a response. But he is somebody who had so many great stories, from over the years, and would just struck me as someone who was so interesting. I would have loved to have had him on the podcast. So rest in peace, John. And thank you so much for what you have done for this music, because let's be honest, you could make a reasonable argument that music would be quite different had it not been for John Zazula, at least the music that we listen to and love. So, sad news there. I saw a couple of folks that I am, that I follow on social media or that I'm friends with, post pictures of them with John as well. So my condolences to them. If you were close with him, my thoughts go out to you. The next headline, Abysmal Dawn, forthcoming EP available for listening. Los Angeles death metal titans Abysmal Dawn will be releasing a brand new EP, Nightmare Frontier, which I think is possibly shorthand for all of the homeless people living on the streets, because we have the worst, or one of the worst mayors in the history of American politics. I don't know whether any of you guys saw that, but Eric Garcetti, much like most of his mates in the far left, was caught taking pictures at a sporting match without a mask on. He was immediately accused of hypocrisy, to which he said, "I didn't inhale." So he was apparently, or he claims that apparently while he was, I'm going to try and find an article about this actually, so I don't fuck it up completely. But apparently while he was posing for this photo, apparently he didn't breathe, which means that it's almost certain that he couldn't have caught COVID that way. And when even CNN is calling you out, I mean, Jesus Christ, then people have got your number. So it says here, on Sunday, Eric Garcetti was on hand to see the Los Angeles Rams punch their ticket to the Super Bowl, as were plenty of the city's luminaries, including Irvin Magic Johnson, who posted pictures on social media. In one, Johnson is standing with Garcetti, the Democratic mayor of Los Angeles and president of Joe Biden's nominee to be the ambassador to India. Or President Joe Biden's nominee to be ambassador to India, and San Francisco Mayor London Breed, also a moron. None of them are wearing masks. In another picture, Johnson poses with California Governor Gavin Newsom. Neither man is wearing a mask. Gavin Newsom, another absolute fucking weapon. This was Eric's response. "I wore my mask the entire game. When people ask for a photograph, I hold my breath and I put it here and people can see that." But it's Joe Rogan who's wrong, and it's Joe Rogan who's spreading misinformation. That Abysmal Dawn EP, by the way, is pretty good stuff. As a matter of fact, I would say the first track on that EP, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, might be one of my favorite Abysmal Dawn songs that I've heard. The latter part of it with the covers and stuff, that's a bit throwaway, but that track is fucking excellent, and makes me very excited to hear what they do next. Dark Angel to enter the studio before the end of 2022. In his latest Twitch stream, drummer Gene Hoglan has confirmed that following his second departure from Testament nearly 2 weeks ago, he has redirected his focus to Dark Angel, where he is currently writing new material for the band's first studio album since 1991's Time Does Not Heal, and also revealed that the band is planning to hit the studio before the end of the year. A tentative release in 2023 is expected for the new record. I am going to just go ahead and say this, and you guys know what a big Testament fan I am. There is more to that story, when I say the story, him splitting from the band, than I suspect has been revealed to the public. And I wouldn't be surprised if Gene said to old Scully D that he hates Justin Trudeau. Because I think Gene is still a Canadian citizen, if I'm not mistaken, or Canadian resident at least. Let's see. Where does Gene Hoglan live? I'm on Wikipedia, so that's also only so. Oh no, he was born in Dallas, Texas. My mistake. I think I probably got. I think I probably might have thought that he was Canadian, obviously because of the strapping young lad connection. But no, Dallas, Texas. So even more, more reason to be suspicious. They would have had a conversation. Him and old Scully D and Gene said, "You know what? I think I'm going to be voting for the GOP in 2024." And Scully D probably accused him of misinformation and kicked him out of the band. Let's see if there's anything else. Nothing really grabbing my attention. So let's see what they say over on the Democrats Guide to Rock Music. I heard some fucking crazy news last night about Metal Sucks, which I'm not even sure I'm allowed to say. So I'm going to shut up about it because just in case I'm betraying any confidence. But we'll talk about it in the weeks to come for sure. As ever, Bori can't help himself from doing the weekly or daily check-in with Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent says he won't play any concerts where venues enforce COVID-19 vaccine or mask mandates. If I were an artist, what would I do? Actually, I wouldn't give a fuck. Play wherever. It's the venue's issue, not mine. I'm all about that money. I'm all about stacking that pyramid of cash. So, especially playing black metal, because we all know how rich you can get from that. Watch Pro shot video of Glenn Tipton performing Metal Gods with Judas Priest at 2021 Bloodstock Open Air. I might have been hallucinating this, but I'm sure I saw a headline where Rob Halford has claimed responsibility for this 4-piece fiasco. Basically them deciding to go out on tour as a 4-piece, leaving Andy Sneap at home, him going, what the fuck? And then them reversing course just a couple of days or a couple of weeks later. Anyway, not that that's particularly consequential. Metallica releases Met on Tour video edit of King Nothing performance from first 40th anniversary concert. I'm not even going to bother reading that article, but I will say about King Nothing, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. I think it's a great song. And I think there was an episode that Mike Hill did a while back on Everything Went Black where they were talking about Load. And actually saying that, in hindsight, it's not as bad of a record. I mean, I definitely think it's fucking way better than Saint Anger. I also think it's better than Death Magnetic. And frankly, I think it's better than the last Metallica album as well. I mean, there's at least songs there that I like. So King Nothing being one of them. I think Bleeding Me is, again, controversial, but might be a contender for the top 10 or one of my top 10 Metallica tracks. I just thought I'd mention that. But I really like that episode, and I mean, I've said it many times before, but if you don't subscribe to Everything Went Black yet, you really ought to. It's fucking excellent. Corey Taylor hopes something like the Astroworld Festival disaster never happens at a Slipknot concert, nor do I. Current owner of Vinnie Paul's home in Texas. It was meant to be a party house. I had a gander at the house. It's pretty swank. And considering that it's only on the market for $750,000, I mean, if you try and build a house like that here in the UK, that's fucking £7.5 million. Whilst they fleece you for everything else that they possibly can. Let's see what else there is. We've already spoken about Watain. Arch Enemy releases new single, Handshake with Hell. The first track that they released of this, I often talk about Qobuz and how much I love the service, but one thing that Qobuz is fucking terrible at, like at the end of Spotify where it goes into, bands that it thinks you will like. For some fucking insane reason, they seem to think that if you like anything that is remotely metal, you automatically would like In Flames and Arch Enemy. So, jarringly, as I was listening to that Chaos Perversion record over and over again, at the end, it's like this last song ends, I'm like, great, because it's so short, the first few times you listen to it and you're doing other stuff, you don't necessarily think about the fact that the album's over. And you're kind of anticipating, that next kick of pure, sinister evil into the Necrosphere approved evil. And then all of a sudden, Arch Enemy comes on, or In Flames comes on. And I heard the first single that they released off of this, pile o' shite. And it is utterly, utterly terrible. I mean, that's the charitable way of describing it. terrible. The Jackie way of describing it is a load of fucking absolute steaming elephant shit. Machine Head completes work on colossal new album. Can't wait. I don't really think that... actually, let's talk about this. Late Exodus singer Paul Bailoff gets his own reaction figure from Super 7. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that there is a pentagram with a hammer and sickle emblem just above Paul Bailoff's name on the action figure box. The fucking blister card that it comes on. The action figure, by the way, looks absolutely terrible. I've never seen something that's so fucking brazenly a cash-in. It's a disgrace to the man's legacy. But anyway, they released a T-shirt with that symbol on. I don't know where it comes from. You all know my personal opinion is that I think the hammer and sickle should be treated with as much disdain as the swastika, because it has almost certainly been responsible for as much, if not more, misery in the world. But that being said, I suspect this might be a troll by Carrie of Zetro and Jack, in which case it's actually pretty funny. But what was really funny was the response to some of to some of this on Facebook. So they posted a picture of the T-shirt on Exodus's Facebook page, and naturally you had one side, Zetro's people, who piled in and said, fuck communism, blah blah blah, it's terrible. Let's be honest, kind of like what I would say, not necessarily post, because I can't be bothered to get involved in fucking arguments with morons on social media. But then you had the anarcho-communists step in, and that to me was... I don't know how much any of you guys know about the concept or the theory of anarcho-communism, but it is possibly the fucking stupidest thing I have ever heard of in my entire life. So, not to turn this into a TED Talk, but let's quickly read the definition of this according to Wikipedia. So, anarcho-communism, also known as anarchist communism, is a political philosophy and anarchist school of thought which advocates the abolition of the state, capitalism, wage labor, social hierarchies, and private property. It retains respect for personal property along with collectively owned items, goods, and services. It supports common ownership of the means of production and direct democracy, as well as horizontal networks of workers' councils and production and consumption based on the guiding principle: from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. I need 8 Ferraris, and there's no cop to stop me from taking it from you, you fucking scrawny little wimp. I mean, there you go. That's where it falls apart. Human beings always organize themselves in hierarchies, and whatever shape that hierarchy takes is typically dependent on the infrastructure that governs it. So, when you want to live like fucking Mad Max, the strong is going to take from you what they want, and they will define their own needs. As I said, the funniest thing about anarcho-communists that I've seen is they are the first ones to use that old stock standard, tried and true social media argument: go read a book. If you in any way think anarchy and communism combined, two fucking moronic ideas, and this is coming from somebody who believes the government should stay out of my life and stay out of my pocket. But I do believe that there should be some sort of state. There needs to be some sort of law and order. There needs to be somebody that's putting the infrastructure in place in the country. But if you believe in anarcho-communism, and you have at any point said to somebody, go read a book, then you can go get fucked. Anyways, just thought I'd mention that. I thought that was a pretty amusing little nugget that I saw. Actually, speaking of which, another little nugget I saw this week is that my friends in PANZERFAUST was at the trucker rally in Canada, protesting boy child Justin Trudeau's fucking ridiculous, I think it's like cross-border vaccine mandates that he wants to roll out. There's been about 50,000 truckers there, and naturally, they were almost immediately accused of every sort of terrible thing under the sun. Misogyny, racism, homophobia. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they tossed, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in there as well. But anyway, it's not what happened. I think there was one or two people there that had, one fucking moron had a Confederate flag, and another absolute slithering, slimy cunt had a swastika flag. I wouldn't put it past the government to dunk someone like that in a protest like that, just so that the news can focus on that. But either way, I saw PANZERFAUST were there, and I did post about this on social media. But I just want to stress again, I stand with PANZERFAUST. I think they posted a really balanced and a really well-worded, articulate, succinct message about personal freedom and liberty on their social medias. And right now, and this is a surprise for people that actually stick around to the later parts of the podcast, I have got in the diary a conversation with Brock scheduled for 2 days from now. So we're going to talk about that rally. We're going to talk about all the fucking whack shit going on in the great nation of Canada. I would say, of all of the podcasts I've ever done, that episode that I did with him is probably one of the ones I still get the most comments on. It's typically him, Ghoul, or Alan Averill. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And again, I want to stress, I stand with PANZERFAUST. Ex-typo negative drummer on hypothetical Peter Steele tribute concert. I'd want a female vocalist. I pray you were joking, Johnny. Although maybe it makes sense considering the fact that it would be pretty funny, and I think Pete would probably have found it funny. So maybe he's saying it in the spirit of that. And then I spoke about Harry and Meghan weighing in on the old Joe Rogan controversy. David Crosby, Stephen Stills, and Graham Nash, they've stepped in now as well and demanded removal of their group recordings from Spotify. Misinformation has been solved as a global problem, and Joe Rogan has been vanquished after that seismic announcement. All right, folks, I've been at this now for 25 minutes, so I'm going to zip it and call it the end of the infamous and notorious news segment for this week. That also means that I am just about ready to wrap it up for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. Thank you so much to Ross for coming on the show. Do check out that Immolation record when it hits. Trust me, this is also not the last you will have heard of Immolation on this podcast. Check out Hlamdomrack and check out the Chaos Perversion EP that I spoke about as well. And then make sure that you check back in next week when I have got Tim Pope and Kane Cressel on the podcast to talk about Revelator, the probably best thing that Amenta has ever done, which is saying something because they have got a fucking stellar discography. But that was a phenomenal conversation, and if you're a fan of the band or not, it is worth tuning in for. I'm going to play out this week with PANZERFAUST. I mentioned them just a second ago. I said that I stand with them. I certainly stand with their music. This is a track which, in my opinion, is as close to musical perfection over the course of 10 minutes as is humanly possible. It's of Sons of Perdition, Chapter 2, Render Unto Eden. It came out in 2020. I am going to say goodbye with Promethean Fire, and I will see all of you bad motherfuckers again next week.